Hey, gang, this week's episode is brought to you by LinkedIn Jobs. Hey, LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the candidates that you want to talk to faster. Did you know that every week, nearly 40 million job seekers visit LinkedIn? Post your job for free now at linkedin.com/goodseats. That's linkedin.com/goodseats to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. And now, here's our show.
In 1930, the US reached the semi-finals of the first World Cup and then beat England 1-0 in the 1950 finals. Yet still the game struggled.
I never played with an American-born player until I joined the national team and met Kyle Rowe Jr. Everybody that I played with growing up until the age of 17, 18 years old was of an ethnic background. Very few Americans play the game of soccer.
While soccer remained an amateur, almost underground pursuit for the ethnic minorities, the big-time, big-money sports of gridiron football and baseball were awash with all-American heroes.
We were familiar with the big names of other sports, and we felt that we really had to get big names from soccer. Well, those were all overseas people, and Pelé was the biggest and the best.
In 1975, at a price of $7 million, Pelé signed for the New York Cosmos. The NASL started to flourish.
During halftime of Pelé's first game with the Cosmos, Pelé came into the dressing room and asked us not to pass him the ball that often because he was getting exhausted.
In 1977, Pelé led Cosmos to the NASL title.
I think it was 77, Father's Day 77, when we saw the Cosmos outdraw the Yankees and Mets combined. I think it was playoffs in 1977 when we sold out the stadium on a regular basis, standing room only, 78,000, which had never been done even by the Giants. And then a couple of moments, some really major games where we actually played well.
Confidence was at an all-time peak.
This league will become as big as the NFL is, and that this country, North America, will become the center of world soccer.
Following the success of New York Cosmos, who had attracted Warner Brothers as their backers, the NASL expanded to 24 teams. The problem was the Cosmos were the exception rather than the rule. The 6 new owners who had been wooed by the sight of a packed Yankee Stadium had entered into soccer for a quick dollar. But by the early 1980s, the NASL experiment began to falter.
Welcome to Good Seats Still Available, a curious little podcast devoted to exploring what used to be in professional sports. Here's your host, Tim Hanlon.
Well, now, how you doing, everybody? My name's Tim Hanlon. It's Good Seats Still Available. Yes, sit down, buckle up, and join us for our weekly joyride into what used to be in professional sports. Thanks for finding us. And we are ecstatic to have you here. And we are equally excited to have our guest this week. I would call him, frankly, the most underrated player in New York Cosmos soccer history. The one, the only, the National Soccer Hall of Famer, Werner Roth, joins us for a fascinating conversation in our sort of unending quest to learn everything we could ever learn about the vaunted New York Cosmos. Again, the argued reason for this series of podcasts in the first place from almost 5 years ago now. We've been doing this, and a lifelong passion for the team, obviously a childhood memory and stuff. And Werner is arguably the flame keeper for the history and the contributions of the Cosmos soccer franchise. And it's a wonderful discussion. We get into lots of stuff, lots of new bits and pieces of information, some of which was completely new to me. And if you consider yourself a North American Soccer League fan, a fan of soccer in the United States generally, a Cosmos fan specifically, stay tuned because you're going to find this to be a just treasure trove of fun and fascinating stuff. And the clip that you sort of heard there at the beginning kind of sets it all up as we get into our conversation this week. That clip is from an amazingly essential, I think, for any soccer fan, box set. It's called The History of Football, The Beautiful Game. It came out in 2002. It's very reasonably priced in places like Amazon and whatnot. I don't know if it's ever aired. I'm sure it's part of streaming services out there now. It's narrated by a guy named Terrence Stamp. I think the easy thing to say is that it ran on the BBC, but I think that's maybe not true. But it is chock full of great stuff about the history of the game worldwide. But in particular, the snippet you heard there was sort of the few minutes focus on that of the United States and the sort of rise and beginning of the fall of the North American Soccer League, a topic, of course, that we've gone on about in previous episodes, and we'll continue to do so because it's endlessly fascinating. And Werner Roth is a perfect person to have a conversation about that. And you heard him actually in that clip, along with the late Phil Woosnam, the commissioner of the North American Soccer League for most of its life, Clive Toye, clearly a former guest of ours, the alluring of Pelé and the running of the New York Cosmos at that time. And if anybody is sort of qualified to kind of explain what was going on in the, let's call it BP days, that is before Pelé's arrival, officially June 10th, 1975, and AP after Pelé, I think that's a good demarcation. It's Werner. He was part of this Cosmos team from almost its inception. And by the way, this is 51 years to the week, I think, that the team was founded, February 1971. Werner joined the team for the 1972 season. And we'll get into sort of how and why and what the composition of the team was at that point. And frankly, we're going to ride through what it was like before, during the Pelé experience, the 3 years there in the mid-'70s, and then afterwards, the fears, the concerns that the propping up, shall we say, the edifice of Pelé's arrival and then departure, the worries that perhaps with him would go all of this excitement. That was not to be the case, and Werner Roth was very much a pillar of this team in all of those phases, and frankly, the captain of the team for two of the three championships that Werner was part of. 1972 was the early part, but in 77 and 78, two legendary seasons, he was captain, and he is just a wealth of information and a flame keeper for sure. Very passionate about keeping the history and the memories alive, not only of the team, but just soccer in general. And there are reasons beyond the Cosmos as to why Werner Roth is a member, and rightly so, of the National Soccer Hall of Fame. So stay tuned. Fascinating conversation with the captain, Werner Roth, coming up in just a few moments' time. You're going to enjoy this. Buckle up for safety because it's a hoot. Let's quickly say hello to our sponsor, Friends of the Week. That's our pal Dean Mitchell in San Diego. It's sportshistorycollectibles.com. Promo code for you there is Good Seats for 15% all of your purchases. And as listeners of this show know, sportshistorycollectibles.com is a wondrous place to find well-curated, well-lit, well-described, and exceedingly well photographed memories, souvenirs, collectible items that range from things like press guides and yearbooks and buttons and pins and stickers and all kinds of other ephemera, I guess, from perhaps those memories of various teams and leagues that are no longer with us or previously domiciled across a wide array of sports. Soccer, of course, among them. Lots of cool stuff in there if you're a North American Soccer League fan or even an American Soccer League fan, or even early days MLS. How about the Tampa Bay Mutiny or the Miami Fusion or perhaps Chivas USA? Already some defunct teams from that league too. And you're going to find an overwhelming amount of great stuff and memories. You're going to lose a lot of time, of course, but hopefully also part with a few bucks as well to just own some of these things that you just must have. It's a great site. Dean and his friends put put a lot of love and effort into it. There's new stuff coming all the time. It's frankly a much more curated version, I guess, of an eBay, and you can always trust that the items are of the highest quality and will be shipped to you with expertise and with all your satisfaction as a consumer. It's sportshistorycollectibles.com. It's all one word, sportshistorycollectibles.com. And again, use that promo code early and often, good seats, all one word, good seats, for 15% off all of your item purchases. Thanks, Dean, for your sponsorship of the show. We appreciate it. It goes back almost to the beginning of this show, and we could not appreciate it more. And we cannot appreciate you more for continuing to listen. Great conversation. We welcome to our microphones the great Werner Roth. Here's our chat that we had just last week. Please, as always, enjoy. I want to start with a little personal anecdote because there's another scenario here, and I don't want to be too much of a fanboy here, but you also don't remember, I think back in, I want to say it was 1976, the winter thereof. This was sort of the year between Downing Stadium and going to Yankee Stadium, and you and I believe it was Bobby Smith came to my school in beautiful Hohokus, New Jersey, up in Bergen County to I believe. You gave us awards because our soccer league we did really well that year, and introduced us to this literally and figuratively foreign concept of professional soccer and these New York Cosmos, which we had never kind of really understood or heard about, but you were still game to sign a few autographed pictures and be the Pied Pipers, if you will. So number one, thank you for your unwitting instilling of me in the professional game, because Lord knows I was playing it as a kid, but to actually know that there was a professional league and a professional team in the New York metropolitan area, that was a revelation to a kid who was 9 years old.
Well, same with me. I grew up in Queens, New York, and ethnic community, and we played soccer all the time, but we never heard of pro soccer except in Europe and South America. And we used to read a magazine called The Kicker, which was about the German Bundesliga, and I first heard about this young international, Franz Beckenbauer, tearing up the fields over there. And but we never considered at that age, 10, 11, 12, even until I was out of high school, we never thought pro soccer would come to the U.S. We played, our biggest objective professionally was to play for our men's first team and get paid, $50, $75 a game. And it's how I initially started paying my way through college. And of course, we heard in the late 70s, the late 60s that, after the 66 World Cup, which all of us in Queens watched at Madison Square Garden breathlessly.
Oh, yeah, the Felt Forum, I think, or was it the main?
Well, it might have been played there as well, but you mean the Felt Forum within Madison Square Garden?
Yeah, downstairs.
I'm not sure, but it was the old Madison Square Garden, and it was full, and it was an incredible match, of course, and it wasn't until some months after that there was some speculation from a guy named Eric Besser, who was a German newspaper writer in New York, the only guy that was writing about soccer at the time. But he initially floated the idea that there's a group forming to start a pro league in the U.S. And of course, there were three groups forming, and all three formed a pro league in the States, and all of them failed. So, we had our ups or downs in the early days, but yeah, we had no inclination that pro soccer was in any of our futures. And then when one of our best German-Hungarian players signed a contract with the Washington Whips in, I guess it was 67, I was still in college, 67, 68 perhaps, and he got me a tryout there. And I went to Washington for a summer and saw what, real pro soccer was about. And in terms of the training and the commitment and all of that. And they offered me a contract, which I accepted. And I came back to New York to leave college for a semester or two. And before I got home, I got a letter saying that the league had disbanded and I should not make any changes in my plans according to my past discussions with them. So the league folded, and then when it resurrected, when Clive and Phil Woosnam finally tried to resurrect the league, there were only 4 clubs left. It wasn't enough for a competitive season. And but he did come out to some of the German-American League games and spoke to some of the players. And this was maybe 70, 71. And we were all skeptical. I was back in school. I was about to graduate, so I wasn't about to sign anything. And so I didn't play with them in 71, which is when they started. And
let's back up for a second. Though. You're talking about the German-American League. I'm not sure. I'd love to just get our audience who is unfamiliar with sort of the New York metropolitan area and the
unfamiliar with
semi-pro. Well, some people, it's actually kind of important, right? Because ultimately,
of course, absolutely,
became the Cosmopolitan Soccer League, which actually has a little bit of a tributary into the Cosmos story. But can you explain what this German-American League was?
Well, it was a social. It was the social club concept, the sports social club concept that was brought over with all of the ethnic Germans, Eastern Europeans, Italians, Swedes, everyone, and South American people as well that emigrated. But our neighborhood was mostly Germanic, so the name German-Hungarian Soccer League. You can imagine the ethnicities. We played against clubs like the Greek Americans, the every Blue Star, which was a great Jewish team. But every nationality had their team and their clubhouse and their field and their restaurant and their youth leagues, which we never paid for. Nobody ever paid to play youth soccer. It would have been unheard of. And so these were foreign ethnic leagues and clubs that were created basically for their ethnic members. And then it wasn't until I got into the league, into the men's team in the late 60s, I guess maybe 66, 67, and where we started getting some, Brazilians, George Ciega, which was the first player ever signed by the Cosmos. And he's the guy that got me to Washington for the tryout in the late 60s. But so it wasn't until late 60s that these clubs and the whole league really began to encourage, Americans to participate and all of that.
Now, you were basically a first generation citizen, if you will, right? You were born abroad, but then you came as a child to that area, right? So you essentially were an American citizen.
I became a citizen when I was first drafted by the national team.
Right. So but you probably had this sort of semi-unique experience in that. I mean, this is a little, for all intents and purposes, truly ethnic in background, right? And arguably, strongest interest in the sport, purest, bringing it over and what they remember from the old world and trying to sort of fashion something into the new, but completely still devoid of what we now know as the stereotypical American player per se, right?
Yeah. And not only trying to establish the game. I mean, they had serious matches. They had football stadiums, not of the kind, of course, that you have today, but then it was all about function and not, comfort. So we had fields. They weren't grass, but they were level and they were lined, and we had referees and we had schedules, and people came out to see us by the thousands. So for us, it was a continuation of the social club concept. And we had fans in their 60s and 70s that were there watching who had played with our club. Our clubhouse was festooned with pictures and, silverware from, the decades in the league. So it was a proud accomplished league that never, had the objective of making any serious money on the game. Otherwise, they would have formed a real professional league. But they were doing it for the social benefit of the community. And it was a club membership that you were kind of born into. And, you stayed involved. If you stayed in that neighborhood, you stayed involved most of your life. So, and, it was mostly youth oriented. It was about, providing the kids a place to play.
Well, look, I'm also sure, though, that when foreign teams came to play professional exhibitions, the International Soccer League through the early part of the 60s, and even just the one-offs at Yankee Stadium or in those other places, I'm sure those were major events in your domain as well, right? It gives everybody a chance to see their heroes in person, in the flesh.
Absolutely, and we were competitive. I mean, our players had the benefit of early childhood development. You alluded to it, in terms of a European or South American upbringing. So early childhood development, which we now know is the foundation of player development at any level. So we had that benefit. We played every day. So we were basically, incorporating the 10-year, 10,000-hour rule, which is now known. You have to play at least 2.5 to 3 hours a day or train to be elite at almost anything. So we had that benefit. We were poor. We had, in many cases, little other recreational outlets. And so we had some pretty good teams. Our all-star team were very competitive against the international competition that we played against. And so NASL really had a good playing foundation to grow from. But of course, in their early days, they didn't either know that or care about that. They brought in, whole teams for a summer. They, brought in mostly international players that would go back. It wasn't until Clive and Phil, wrote the memo that, players, we need to Americanize the game and develop locally as well as, internationally.
So aside from your Whips, quote unquote experience, before we get into the founding of the Cosmos Park, because it's a hugely important story that you're an essential component of. What do you remember of those, besides the tryout, of those first, well, actually two leagues that actually did start in 1967, the United Soccer Association, all those fully imported teams, and the NPSL, and then the second year being that sort of combined NASL. Do you have any memories of that, in particular, the two and then one team that were part of it, the Generals and the Skyliners?
Yeah, no, I went to a few Generals matches. I thought they were kind of one-off because you didn't really hear anything about those leagues within our soccer community, our ethnic soccer community. They were a non-entity. So you didn't really give them a lot of credit. You're waiting to read that they'll fold again. That was my picture. And, they played in better.
I'm sorry, was that because of either arrogance, elitism, Americans don't understand the sport, no great players
well, it could have been a number of things. If anybody did any market research, they would have understood that the ethnic fans in the ethnic communities across America, and they were, as you probably know, they were everywhere, that they didn't pay $10 for a ticket. Most of them didn't drive, so they stayed locally. So if you were playing at Yankee Stadium, it was okay because you could take public transportation, but any form of transportation was a hindrance to fan attendance because, first of all, they didn't know about these players, which is, I guess, to some degree, not a lot of marketing effort behind it, or at least in areas that we accessed. And really no defined schedule. We didn't really know until the day before. We didn't look for schedules, but we didn't know the day before, who was playing, where they were playing, and at what time. So it was a relatively disorganized approach, having failed already a number of times, that wasn't really taken seriously. But I think then by 71, there were a number of teams in the league that played. The Cosmos were at Yankee Stadium, and I think there were a number of players in the league that were good competition. The first year when I came to the club as a guest player late in the season, they asked me to play. They were down some players, and I realized they were all mostly Greek Americans. They were, and who I knew all of the players basically because we played against them in the German-American League. They were mostly Greeks and a couple of German players from Hoda. And, they didn't go, the club didn't go very far that first year. But I that's basically all I remember. They were really not on the map in the late 60s, early 70s until, for me at least, and for many of my, friends and neighbors, for me, it didn't really start until 72, until they moved out to Hofstra. They initiated a major effort to connect with the Long Island Junior Soccer League and with the New York Soccer Association and with those leagues, and came out and about in the neighborhood. And Gordon Bradley, who was the first coach in 71, I knew personally because I played with him on some all-star teams, and he played with, I think, Hoda or New York Ukrainians, one of those teams. So we saw each other a lot, and I knew he was. Yeah,
he even played for the Generals, I think, in 68 as well.
I think he did play for the Generals, and in fact, he always tells the story where he covered Pelé and kept him scoreless. Pelé couldn't live that down for the years that we played together. But Gordon was around. Gordon was very ambitious and very excited about the possibilities. I wasn't as invested as he was, and so when he called in 71, to invite me to attend a few matches, play a few as a guest player, I did it because basically he's a friend. And then in 72, he said, "Look, this is going to be serious. There's a serious effort. You're not going to have to travel much. You only need," because by then I had just started a career in architecture, was working in the city, and I needed to focus on that. And I told him, and he said, "Yeah, not a problem. You'll fly when you can and train when you can. Your job comes first and all that." We practice at night, so that was not a big deal. And of course, I was interested enough in my own player development. I didn't know at that time where, I would end up, or if soccer would be a career opportunity, whatever. But I was always training. I was always researching. I was always playing. So this was for me another, additional season of good training, good travel, some good players, and some good competition. So that's kind of how I slid into that situation in 72.
Well, if I remember correctly, 71, obviously this is way before even I was sort of conscious of this team, and perhaps maybe even some cases your fellow players that got sucked into the extravaganza that it became. 70. It seems like this German-American League actually was almost sort of like a backyard feeding ground for
totally
a need to get a team up and running, because I think this franchise was awarded in February of 71. And if memory serves, like the season kind of started around April or so. That's not a hell of a lot of time to get a team together, let alone warm bodies.
Well, Clive called Gordon, and Gordon called everybody, and he had a team. They tell the great story about setting up a team meeting, signing meeting up in at JFK Airport at the Hilton Hotel. And, they would negotiate with all the players, and they put their team together, $75 a week, take it or leave it for 3 or 4 months, and no health insurance, you're on your own as far as everything else is concerned. But like most players that participated in those early days, we love to play. And, whether it's $75 a game or 75 cents a game, if you had a good team and you had a good field and a good bar nearby, you were all set.
Maybe a meal as well.
Absolutely.
All right. So walk me through then how you make that semi-pro or amateur player in German-American League with a career, if you will, a day job, a budding day job career. How's the conversation go between you and Gordon about this Cosmos thing, how it's going to go, and what were you promised, so to speak?
Very little. It was a one-page contract, and it basically, my discussion with Gordon, and I mean, we've all been on these teams before. We were, for a couple of years, I played with KLM, the Dutch airline team, for free tickets, to travel. And we do a couple of games in the States, and we do a couple of matches in Holland. And so we've all been on this before. He didn't need to explain anything. Almost every player at that time, I think there were 2 foreign players, but I think every player at that time, 71, 72, was German-American League, had a full-time job that had to be taken care of, etc. So he didn't have to tell me much. He said, you're getting $75 a game, and the season's this long. There's no guarantees. Do you want to play?
How much sacrifice did you have to make for the day job?
I didn't make any sacrifices, and they knew that. They acquiesced to.
I guess nobody did, right? Because it was still
nobody
kind of a part-time-ish thing, right?
Absolutely, it was totally part-time-ish. And we worked, and if we made it to training, we made it to training. If we didn't make it to training, we didn't. If we got to the airport on time, we didn't. It didn't matter. We had 15, 16 players, all we needed is 11. And so we were good. There was none of this hoopla stuff that goes on nowadays. So this was, the rough and tumble. This was the wild, wild west of early pro soccer. And it was great. I worked for a guy. I was very lucky. Worked for a guy. He was just opened an office. He was from San Juan. He was building prefabricated architecture, which was my passion. I loved architecture and the ability to build small and cheap. But in any case, so he knew the game. He loved the game. He used to come to Downing Stadium. He never came out to Hofstra, but he came to Randall's Island, Downing Stadium, because it was near the city, and he would bring clients. We were, as we were building high rises in Jersey City at that time, we were selling the process, the Shelley systems, as it was called, internationally, and so we were doing pitch meetings a couple of times a week to Koreans and Chinese and Africans and people that were interested in low cost housing built well, and so he brought clients to the matches, and he was very proud of introducing me to them after the game. And when Pelé arrived, he was like in his glory. So for me, it actually helped my career. By the time it got to be, beyond semi-pro, like in 75, 76, when we were really prepping for the big time, Shelley gave me time off, and, as long as I got the job done, I could come in, not come in, etc. Anyway, I could incorporate the game into my career at the time. And then as it happens, he sold a system to Saudi Arabia to build housing for their guest workers. And so he left 76, the office. He took half the office, wanted me to go. They left for Saudi Arabia, and I had the option. It actually gave me the impetus to negotiate a little harder with the Cosmos and try to get a full-time salary that I could play full-time, and which was, of course, my dream at the time. Pelé was on board, there was talk of other players coming, and so.
Yeah, and this was night and day from 72, 73. I'm really so the 72 through 74. Oddly and uniquely winning the championship in 72. But I'm curious as to what your mindset is. Obviously, some really interesting players, some of whom were part of the 71 experience, like Randy Horton, legendary name, and Siggy Stritzel and Stan Startzel. I'm just curious as to what your mindset was like, knowing that here you're coming in now full time, if you will, quote unquote, in 72. But having played at Yankee Stadium in front of hundreds, right? And now going to Long Island to play at Hofstra, it almost feels to me like this might be a step backwards or towards more anonymity. And did it feel that way, or did you I'm going to play this to see how it goes? I'm getting paid. I'm going to have fun with it.
Yeah, I think that last part, I'm getting paid, I'm going to go with it. I don't think I was really expecting a whole lot from the Cosmos or the NASL at that time, 71, 70, 72, when I first saw it signed. So there were no dollar signs in my eyes or anything. I had a good job, and this was my love, my passion, my pastime, my hobby. So it all went well. I didn't think of it as a step down. In fact, it was bad for me because I had father to travel for practice. It was horrible. But most of the players came from the island. So, for them it was good. And I think we started to attract some local fans, that were new to the game, but kind of embraced the Cosmos for all the clinics that we did, for playing a game that their kids loved, So it was really, I don't think we could have done that in the Bronx. I think that the Americanization of the game in the Bronx, it would have still been mostly ethnics, but on Long Island, it was mostly Americans. And I think it was the beginning of the Americanization of the game. We found some local players, developed then over the next 2 year, Paul Lasure, as an example, Ronnie Atanasio from Adelphi, but there was some good local talent to be mined, certainly. But I don't know if it was almost until 75 when I saw Pelé step off the helicopter, at Randall's Island, that it kind of clicked that, okay, maybe this is going somewhere.
Okay. Before the white hot comet of Pelé, give me a sense of, though, like sort of leading up to that, right? I mean, according to what documentary you watch or various people one might have talked to or read about, it feels to me like the Erdogan brothers and Clive, or either in that order or together, or one trying to convince the other group, that how far away or how close was this idea of this sort of bigger star-studded kind of endeavor? I mean, 73, 74, right? I mean, my understanding is that the Pelé chase was kind of underway. George Best was kind of thrown around as a name, but frankly, that sounds like a pipe dream given the relative small crowds and small footprint, especially in a big sports city like New York.
You would think, but you have to look back. The Erdigans were the first major, after Lamar Hunt, I would say, and maybe one or two of the other Lee Stern teams that stuck it out. They were, because of their love for the game and because they were aficionados of the game, they traveled the world to watch some of their favorite players. Clive and Phil finally found an audience for their dream, which they had, back in the 60s and early 70s, their dream of a dream team, actually, a combination of international stars and good young American players. But they've always had that dream, that they share it with everyone? No, but certainly within the ownership group, that's what sold Steve Ross and Jay Emmett on the concept of a successful professional league in the U.S. And because Clive framed it, in movie-making terms, this is a blockbuster that you can cast with some of the best internationals in the world, and you'll sell out the stadium every week. So that dream was always there. they knew they couldn't implement it right away. There was going to be a growth arc, a learning arc, a financial arc of how it's going to be done and how much it's going to cost. So, but Steve Ross was in, the Erdoğans were in, and Clive literally had a free rein, maybe not a blank check at the time, but a free rein to build this club to their ambitious goals and to make it happen. So, he knew, and he was now of the opinion, he and Phil Woosnam were now of the opinion that they made a lot of mistakes in their previous efforts, and here they have to look at it long term. Build the grassroots development of the game, grow the national program, toy with television as a means of getting the game out more, but they made a lot of mistakes there as well. But so when he went after George Best in 1974, that was part of the plan. When that didn't materialize, he went after Pelé because Pelé had retired. And you're right, he had been going after Pelé since the 1970 World Cup, which is where he sold the dream team to the Erdoğans. And so from that point on, whenever and wherever he could realistically confront or meet up with Pelé, he would make that move. And Pelé always said no. And then it wasn't until he retired in, I believe it was early 75, late 74, whenever, that Clive saw the opportunity again and immediately, sprung into action. And that combined with Pelé's financial situation at the time, created the Big Bang in U.S. soccer. And
well, there was also in 74, though, the NASL had actually gotten some sprouts of shall we say, new life. I mean, I think the transition from even from 73 to 74 was, the 74 season, the Pacific Northwest franchises and
yep.
San Jose and I think the final
Seattle.
was, exactly. And so there was some real, if one was paying attention, especially in some of these new markets, they were drawing some significant crowds, like in San Jose in particular.
Well, they were paying attention. They saw what Clive was doing out in Long Island, and they read the plan, the NASL plan. And, Phil at the league encouraged everybody to take that, that formula, player development, youth-oriented, education, clinics, master classes, coaching corners, everything under the sun to Americanize the game. And with that Americanization, of course, they always kind of took the ethnic market for granted, but, the ethnics are always going to come. If you get some of their local players involved, they're always going to come and support if you don't make it too expensive and too far. So, I think they all started learning what, was in, potentially possible. And they dipped their toes and they saw, yes, this could actually work. And I remember those matches, Portland, Seattle, San Jose. There were crowds, unbelievable. I couldn't believe it. I believed New York because it was New York, but those locations for me was eye-opening. And then of course, knowing or finding out that, they're looking at George Best and Pelé and others of that ilk, made it more plausible.
At what point, were you captain of the team at this point, 74, 75?
No. I had, I was basically struggling to make the cut from one year to the next.
But you were one of a number of standout U.S. players, though, and that obviously gave you some extra credibility and credit.
It did,
right?
And we had a rule in the NASL that at least 3 American players, either American born or citizen, has to start the game. So I was a relative shoo-in in terms of I never took it for granted, but I knew I would always start, but I didn't know I would always be re-signed the following year. That was all based on who else was coming in and all of that. But I used the opportunity and as motivation. I thought, if Georgie Best, Pelé, any of the others they were talking about, ever came here, this is where I want to play. So I went to extra lengths to make sure that I was, as fit as possible and as skilled as possible. And, when the next year came around and we had our initial exhibition matches and, I always made the team. And ultimately it was George Siega and myself that went from 74, I think, to 75. In 75, Clive already knew he was getting Pelé or had a good sense he was getting Pelé. So he brought over like half of the Uruguayan national team, including the Uruguayan captain, by the way, in 75. And that's how we started our season. In 75, Barry Mahey was our longtime captain. Initially, it was John Young. And then Barry Mahey was a longtime captain. Then in 75, I think, when all the South Americans came, Barry asked me to be assistant captain. I had a very good year as well. I won, most valuable player, or maybe it was the most advanced player of the year, which was always a very dubious award.
They liked you a lot. They had to give you something.
Yeah, right. So, but they were also Americanizing it. They were looking at me as being, the new American type of player. And so they wanted as many photo ops as possible. And then in the middle of the season, Pelé arrived. So when Pelé arrived, Barry Mahey was captain. I was co-captain. And then 76, Barry retired. And we got a bunch of players from England, including Keith Eddy, who was the captain of his, first division club in the EPL. And so Keith became captain. I remained as assistant captain. So that was 75, 76. And then 77, beginning of the year, I think Keith Eddy retired. And I was named captain at that time. That was preseason 1977.
Interesting. I guess I have to circle back on that date in June of 75, because obviously it's like it's like AD and BC, right?
Yeah.
So you describe basically the composition of the team prior. I'm guessing that aside from rumor and public dreaming of a player of a caliber of a George Best or a Pelé might someday arrive. What do you remember of the sort of circumstances immediately before this announcement and arrival? How did you find out about it? And then I think maybe more importantly, do you remember anything about sort of those first days, including that nationally televised exhibition with the green paint down in the stadium and all that? Because I mean, in some respects, your head had to have been on a swivel at that point, from what it was, arguably still growing, right? From the years that you mentioned before, the leagues, you're getting more attention, you're getting a few more thousand people at this Downing Stadium thing, but my God, did you ever expect what was going to happen come June 15th or so?
No, and not many people did. Clive and Gordon kept it pretty close to the vest at that time. I guess they didn't want any leaks. There was a notification or an announcement of some sort the week before or the day before the game that a special guest is expected. Well, here's the other thing. You could never, like with Georgie Best, you could never expect it. So don't announce it before it happens, right? So I think that was kind of their attitude. But we were told before the match that before the game started, there would be a special guest joining us. And so after the team lineups, we saw our attention was directed towards the open end of Downing Stadium. and the East River and the New York City skyline, the Manhattan skyline, and a helicopter, this blue helicopter, dark blue and white helicopter, started getting bigger and bigger and started approaching, and fans started, thinking, their wildest dreams were coming true, but still not. There were I think there were more fans, because we usually get around 5,000, 6,000 at that time. There might have been 10,000 or so. But I did notice also, because our stadium was under the Triborough Bridge, partially under the Triborough Bridge, and
charitably I would call it nestled, nestled underneath, right? But charitably is embraced in that stadium.
Yeah, embraced by the bridge, and we occasionally, we'd see fans up there watching, avoiding the $20 or $15 ticket price, and that's a pretty good view from up there, I would imagine. But I noticed heavier than usual bridge attendance on that day. And so we're watching this helicopter get closer, and it lands at the open end, and the door pops open, and out jumps Pelé in this, white tuxedo of sorts. And the fans that were there just, of course, they immediately recognized him, and the place went crazy, and he got standing ovation from everyone until he actually got onto the field and shook hands with all of the players and waved to the fans and did kind of this semi lap of honor, and then sat in a special section and watched a 2-1 loss to Rochester. So, and then in the dressing room, in the very, very humble dressing room of Downing Stadium, we met him again, and we had a chance to talk to him, introduce ourselves. And so for the next couple of days, all you could read in the paper was Pelé's arrival, and very little else, even though the Yankees and I think the Mets were playing at the same time. We were given the back page of I think every New York newspaper and papers around the world, because this was a huge thing, and they had scheduled for a press conference at the 21 Club for a couple of days later that I attended. I and a couple of players attended. That turned into a small riot.
No, it wasn't small. It was pretty all out.
Yeah, as well as, we found out that we had, a major fox in the chicken coop. Dick Young, the baseball writer for the Post, New York Post, and a very influential guy, was so drunk. Well, we all had to wait for Pelé, right? So we were having a lot of drinks at the bar, but he was so drunk he called Pelé, like an imposter. He called the game, like a communist immigrant sport. He made a total fool of himself and had to apologize, the next day profusely. How he didn't get fired, I don't know, but he did invite Pelé then as an apology to a New York Yankees game, his favorite team. But yeah, it turned into kind of an eye opener in many ways. The fight was that was the funniest. If you haven't heard the whole story about it, I would love to tell you. Okay,
please do. Before you do that, I was curious. did they announce when Pelé arrived on the helicopter? Did they announce that he was essentially signing, or was it just a special guest visitor?
Yeah, he was. They didn't say, they didn't have to say. Nobody said anything. The helicopter. And
you guys on the field shaking his hand had no idea. You just shaking his hand of the greatest player in the world, and you had no idea.
We knew that. I mean, most of us knew that they were trying to sign him, and they were trying to sign Georgie Best and all of that. We knew that, and we knew the fact that he was here, that it was that much closer. And by then, of course, he had already signed, right? So. Officially, he'd already signed. He wasn't coming to New York and, leading that circus without a contract. So anyway, a couple of days later, so we all had a good inkling. And, by the time we met in the dressing room thereafter, it was confirmed he had signed. He was going to play the following, maybe not the following game, but the game after that. So the press conference was just basically a public confirmation and, symbolic signing of what was up to that point the most valuable professional sports contract in the history of sports. So, and I think maybe that's what Dick Young was pissed off about. His I don't know who the baseball stars were at the time, but his top stars weren't making, 3.8 to 7 million for the next 3 years. So, we're all there on time, 2:30 or whatever. And we're at the bar, and the photographers and writers, the room was jammed way more than, whatever number it had room for. And there was a security line between the dais and the media of 3 or 4, long dining tables, lined up next to each other and end to end, covered with white tablecloths. So you couldn't really get, and they were all coming in from another area. We were coming in from the bar. So you couldn't get to the dais, right? Pelé is on Brazilian time, so he's an hour or so late. Clive makes the introduction. Pelé and the entourage is here. Please, may I have your attention? I would like to introduce. All of a sudden, as Pelé steps in, it was Steve Ross, the Erdoğans, Jay Emmett, Pelé, Rose, his wife, and Pedro, his new bodyguard, right? Because part of his contract was security. So this fight breaks out. So they all come in, right? They're all standing there waiting to be introduced by Clive, who is at the podium, at the microphone. And 2 photojournalists, and I'm behind them. I'm at the bar, so I'm seeing all of this transpire. 2 photojournalists start pushing for the same spot at the edge of the white table separation. And they start fighting each other. I mean, literally fist to fist, fist to jaw, equipment going everywhere. The dais is, in shock. Clive is on the microphone. Ladies and gentlemen of the press, trying to get them to stop. Nothing's happening. All of a sudden we see Pedro, the security guy, who was maybe 5'6", built like a Cuban former security guard or something. So he gets up on these tables and he's stomping over to the action, to the fight, to try to break it up. But little did anybody know that all the tables weren't connected end to end. There were gaps in between, covered by just tablecloths. So Pedro, stomping over, steps into a gap, disappears from view. The fighters they saw this and they started laughing. They couldn't help but laugh. Everybody had to laugh. It was such an incongruous scenario. The fight breaks up and Clive gets back to business, and we don't see Pedro for the remainder of the press conference. So the after story from Pedro was that he was going to go over to break up the fight. He stepped into a hole that he didn't know was there. He didn't hurt himself too much, but he did need medical attention. But he realized that the fight was broken up when he heard all the laughter, and he, soldiered over on his knees and elbows to the exit and just left to get medical attention.
He diffused a very
absolutely
big situation there. Not unlike Pelé breaking up the 1968 war, right? But,
Yeah, there you go. And which was a indication of the future of Pedro's ability to break up dangerous situations. He always had something funny that he would fall into, literally and figuratively, to break up whatever problem was current. But he was a funny guy.
what's this? LinkedIn Jobs. Hey, these days it can be hard to find and hire the right candidates for your small business. And that's why LinkedIn Jobs made it easier to find the people that you want to talk to faster and for free. You can create a free job post in minutes on LinkedIn Jobs to reach your network and beyond to the world's largest professional network of over 770 million people. Holy mackerel. I added that part. Focus on candidates with just the right skills and experience, and use screening questions to get your role in front of only the most qualified. Then, use the simple tools on LinkedIn Jobs to quickly filter and prioritize who you'd like to interview and hire. It's why small businesses rate LinkedIn Jobs #1 in delivering quality hires versus the leading competitors. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the candidates you want to talk to faster. Did you know that every week, nearly 40 million job seekers visit LinkedIn? Post your job for free at linkedin.com/goodseats. That's linkedin.com/goodseats to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. And now, back to our conversation. Aside from that, and that was just the press conference, the footage that one sees either in Once in a Lifetime, the movie, or just outtakes or whatever, it's just bananas. But the exhibition game with Dallas was a few days after that. Obviously, a completely different dynamic. You had plenty more people hanging off the Triborough Bridge for that game for sure. And then from then on, how did you feel it went? It was sort of Pelé and all these other players, right? And you're now lumped into this group of, who are all these other players? You know, that people are frankly not coming to see everybody else. They're just coming to see the Black Pearl in action. Give me a sense, though. I mean, the level of play, the determination to play. I mean, how much changed or how much didn't change upon his arrival and for the rest of that season? I mean, expectations must have been sky high, but reality also had to set in too, right? He's only one player.
Yeah. I think a lot of things changed and a lot of things stayed the same. The things that immediately changed were the media attention and the attendances that maximized basically, as many people as could get into the stadium and as many media passes as were possible to be given out that was done. The game on the field didn't change all that much. We played very competitively pre-Pelé. We played very competitively post-Pelé. But as you said, and as Pelé said, and as Gordon said, he's only one player, and the rest of the team has to step up. And there is a chance that with a player of this magnitude, that some of the players are going to watch him instead of play him, So that happened for a few weeks where we'd get caught. I certainly got caught watching Pelé on the ball. But that went very quickly because he's such a ego-less person, given his stature. And that, teams usually, integrate pretty well, pretty quickly. So we were all playing on the same team. We all had, things to accomplish, challenges to overcome, teams to defeat, championships to win. So we all got to the business of doing that.
All right. Aside from not being awestruck or him being an accommodating teammate, shifting gears into 76, things are clearly on some higher levels now, right? I mean, you're moving into Yankee Stadium. Obviously, the implicit or explicit expectation of bigger crowds now, not just because of Pelé, but then now some other names, some that were being pursued that were well known, some others that were yet to sort of really hit superstardom, like a Giorgio Canaglia in 76. It must have been intimidating on some level for you in that not only does the world's greatest player now on your team, but rumors of more, and frankly, expectations of a lot more from everybody in the organization. I mean, you were telling me a few minutes ago that you were worried about getting re-signed every year. I mean, your fears or worries must have been magnified on some level now that the circus was now in town.
Actually, it was the opposite. They were reduced significantly.
Interesting.
Because over those 2.5 years, 75, 76 into 77, I basically I was able to spend all my time on the game and on my development. And a lot of that progress created more security, certainly, than I had before. So the arrival of Pelé and possibly others, well, it was never a fear, because you always knew that if these guys come, all boats will be raised, basically. And and after you get Pelé, I mean, who else is going to make that big an impact? For me, it was Beckenbauer too, because he was one of my idols when I was a kid. But no, funny enough, or I don't know, normally enough, I think most of the players kind of took it in stride after a while. After the initial meeting and the recognition and understanding of what's going on, you just get back to business. I mean, it's just what happens. So we were pretty, and again, Pelé's personality was such that, it didn't really come up. It was kind of humorous at times, because how he handled a lot of the attention from fans and media and, like everybody that sees him, anywhere. He just handles the attention with the most incredible grace and simplicity and childlike wonder that, it's just accepted. I've been in rooms with Pelé with young children that idolized him, that within 10, 15 minutes, he makes them feel so at ease and so comfortable that they'll come sit on his lap, put their arms around his shoulder, take away his soft drink, play tricks and jokes. He has that kind of vibe. Another major thing that was different for me personally was that I felt empowered with everything that was going on to negotiate for a real contract and to hold out for a real contract.
Certainly, and knowing that this was,
and by the way, that didn't really go over very well.
No, I'm sure it didn't, and I'm sure there was a bit of inherent risk in all of that, given all the supposed superstars yet to come, but yet, to your point, rising tide, floating boats, right?
Yeah.
You had some cards to play, right? You're a stellar player, right? Well, but you're a U.S. citizen, right? Which is certainly at a premium in that league, right? And it had to seem it come in 77 and 78, 2 championship seasons in a brand spanking new giant stadium. I mean, you must have recognized by then, either in the contract process or not, that this was big time. I probably had to pinch yourself on more than a few occasions, given where you had started from back in 72.
Never pinched, but did look around in awe often. Yeah.
How did you? One thing I remember about you as a player is that you were, I guess, for the lack of a better description, you were pretty Joe Cool about stuff. I mean, on the field, you were pretty level-headed. Obviously, as a captain, for sure. You did all the right captainy things, for sure.
Mm-hmm.
How do you keep a level head, especially given all the craziness of all those, arguably those egos, having to be often kept in check? And by the way, oftentimes, at least you look at some of the clips, especially with Giorgio in the mix, stirring the drink, coming at clashing heads once in a while.
Yeah. I don't know that I have an answer to that, other than maybe, I've experienced in my lifetime some some situations, post-war ethnic cleansing in Yugoslavia that my family had to escape, which took 3 years to get to America. And then, just starting off with nothing here but family. It's all we had. And, coming through it pretty well. So, I've experienced situations that for me were much more difficult or challenging to take advantage of or to, overcome. So it seemed like a natural progression for the game. And if you knew Clive, Gordon, Steve and Jay and the Erdoğans, you'd know that these guys can accomplish almost anything they set their minds to. So, by the beginning of 75, when these rumors were starting to be spread by people that I respected, I kind of expected, that situation, still not ready for it emotionally, of course, when you meet Pelé and Beckenbauer and Carlos Alberto. Giorgio Canaglia, I played against, I think I suggested that Clive sign Giorgio. I played against him a few years earlier on the U.S. national team, and he was playing for the Italian national team. We played in the Olympic Stadium in Rome, and he scored 3 goals. The Italians beat us 7-2. It might have been 9-2. I forget. So when Giorgio came, I said, I'd rather be playing with you than against you. But for us, most of the players, except of course those that were cut, we all felt bad, but we all recognized what Clive and Steve were trying to do and how this might impact the future of football in America, pro football in the States. And so I kind of accepted it, cool, hot, calm. I don't know. I kind of accepted it all. Things were happening, here's the other thing. They weren't happening that quickly, right? They were happening relatively slowly. And so you had a chance to, get acclimated to the changes. But mostly everything else was still the same. Steve Ross, Jay Emmett, and the Erdoğans were still great owners. They still came to the matches. They flew to matches. If I had, during my negotiation time, they would send a plane, pick me up, drop me off at the game. I'd play the game. I'd jump back on a plane, come back home. They were supportive to the nth degree. And so it seemed like, and it was happening, it seemed like, it's only going to get better. It's only going to get bigger. And 77, I think the Cosmos proved as a team of individuals, that if we set our minds to something, and we did set our minds to something that year, that we could accomplish it. And, it came down to the last match, to the last couple of minutes. But we knew we were able to do that. So 78, which was a fear for everyone to some degree, that post-Pelé, first season without Pelé, can we still draw the crowds? Can we still, get the attention? Can we still maintain the performances? Was for me a more impactful season, because I think we were able to prove that our motivation can be more internal and less external. Like the great motivation, obviously, in 77 was sending Pelé home as a champion. So that's a singular motivation you only get once in a lifetime, I think. But 78, we were self-motivated. Eddie Fermani turned out to be a hell of a motivator as well. And we were able to do it in basically our home, in front of our own fans in our own city, which was the highlight of that whole season.
I think 77 was sort of the storybook ending that everybody kind of had hoped for. You could not have scripted it any better. And I think, interestingly, 78, in my mind, was essentially, I think, if you look at the brief but impactful history of the team, was probably the perfect season. I mean, it had all the drama in there, the mini game and all that stuff, and the dramatic comeback to the case. But it was, in terms of record, in terms of And you were the captain for both of those championship squads.
Yeah.
At what point, though, as you look around, right, because you had come, like the league itself and like a lot of the players in it, had come so far, so relatively fast. Was there ever a time that you kind of looked around and kind of said, is this sustainable? How does this keep going? I mean, you played another season in 79, which ended in disappointment, at least by Cosmos standards, which turned out to be your last season. But obviously, if people, maybe in hindsight, there were certainly cracks around some of the edges. I mean, what was your mindset? Or were you just too much in the moment of playing, enjoying the success, and with some of the world's greatest players, both on your team and elsewhere?
Yeah, I think it was mostly the latter. By then we had, the 78 season was such a relief just to have won in 77, because that would have been, unthinkable, unforgivable, and many other words.
Or the circus would be, the tent was put up, it came and the big star attraction left, and there goes the rest. Right. But that was a proof positive that you were onto something beyond just the Pelé years.
Yeah. And even beyond that, I think it was just personally, and not with just me, but with other players as well. It was a big relief that we accomplished that. And maybe that was an advantage. We went into the 78 season, as I recall, pretty low key, pretty confident, pretty whatever happens now. It's like, let it happen, bring it on. We can do this. It was less of a pressurized element. And also, 77, we started off with a incredible speech by Steve Ross on the first day of training. I remember Giant Stadium. The grounds crew was still shoveling snow off of the pitch, and he came down in the helicopter, and the entourage, and not read us the riot act, but made it clear that this wasn't necessarily sustainable, that this isn't a given, that we had to come back and do it again, because that's the nature of the game. And I think I'm sorry, I'm saying in 1977 this happened.
Yeah.
Right. Steve Ross came and he read us the riot act to some degree and said how important the season was. So 78, his talk to us was, thank you. Your performances were incredible, and let's do the best that we can this season, and let's enjoy our success. He was consummate in that standpoint, that if he didn't have to put pressure on, he didn't want to add to it. But we thought 78 was kind of a low key season. We were training hard, playing hard. And we knew that, there are bumps in the road. So I thought it was a much more exciting season than 77 from the standpoint of ups and downs. But it was a much less stressful season. So the win was, when I finally felt in, the importance of that win was kind of before the game, seeing that the stadium was full. Pelé was on the bench, supporting us. Steve Ross and his entourage were up in the cheap seats. He was
with his harness.
He was harnessed into his seat. My parents were there. My girlfriend was there. Everybody, all the players, their wives and girlfriends and families was there. So, then it kind of hit me that, we need to do this. Luckily, I think it was Tampa. Yeah, it was Tampa Bay. Luckily, Rodney was out of the game because of an injury. So that kind of took even more pressure off me. And we played well. We had Dennis Stewart came in, right? Dennis Stewart replaced Pelé. He took all the pressure on his shoulders and scored a beautiful third goal. So yeah,
I was at that game, Soccer Bowl '78. I mean, it was probably the crowning achievement. And at that point, I think, putting words in your mouth, I think then it was like kind of playing with house money, I think. And, and then by the end of that season, right, you had the targets were firmly affixed on your back, right? Because you were the team everybody loved to hate. You were the draw. It was all of it. And, with that comes sort of the villain sort of thing. And 79 certainly was a real good example of sort of all of that. How did you, so 79 was your last season. And obviously for the Cosmos, it was an interesting denouement coming off of 78, right? And then a reclaiming, I guess, in 80. How did you wind up leaving the team? Was it kind of your choice? Was it kind of the team's choice? Was it a disdain for how the season had ended? And you were sort of caught up in all of it. How does sort of that?
I didn't really experience much of the season because I had a knee injury in preseason in Colombia, and I came back to New York. I was immediately flown back to New York into surgery, and in those days they did the old type of surgery where they literally go in, no microsurgery yet, and I had about a 6 to 8 week recovery time. I think they initially said 12 weeks, and I was in a cast from my toe to my crotch. And so I didn't really do anything except these special exercises that I needed to do to keep the muscles in my injured leg from getting weak. So basically for all of that time, I was, on my back, on my crutches, trying to keep fit, and didn't come back until I think the beginning of the playoffs. I don't even remember, but no, actually it wasn't even a game. It was a training session about halfway through the season, and I re-injured on the AstroTurf at Giant Stadium. I re-injured my leg and re-ripped my anterior cruciate ligament. And so I was out again for more rehab. And then when I finally came back, I played one match just before the playoffs, or I don't even know if we made the playoffs, but I played one match and it wasn't there. It wasn't happening. I wasn't confident at all. And met with my doctor after that season, and he said, "Look, you can either, keep playing for a year or two, or ski and walk comfortably for the rest of your life. You choose." So, and by the end of the season, Franz had gotten injured as well.
Turf was merciless at Giant Stadium.
It was horrible. Although my original injury happened on beautiful grass field. In any case, so Franz was talking retirement. I had already decided I was going to retire. And then I don't know if he retired then or if he played another season
but then he left and came back. And
I went, moved to my house on the island and basically got involved with other interests and, kept in touch with the team from a distance.
And were you surprised at what ultimately happened to the league in the years that followed? I mean,
of course. Of course. Yeah, it was horrible. But you could see, as you said, the cracking going on, even at the Cosmos. I mean, I loved Giorgio as I love any teammate. And, he was, in some ways, he was an incredible human being, but he was not a team player. And, we found that out too late. He was power hungry, he was arrogant, he thought of himself mostly. And I tried to intervene with the Erdoğans, with Steve Ross. There wasn't, any room there. So I started working with Giorgio actually when, I retired 80, I think 81. I had an office at Warner Communications that I had ever since we were at Warner Communications. So,
really?
Yeah. Pelé had an office. Then Giorgio had an office, of course. But I went back to the office. I was basically cleaning out. Nobody told me to leave. Nobody said anything. I was part of the family, and I understood that. They understood that. But Giorgio and Pepe Pinton at the time, they were very ambitious for the club, for the league, for themselves. And but in my final meeting with, I think it was the GM, I think it was Krikoria Premian at the time, I forget.
Sure.
He said, well, why don't you stay on board and do our community development, which was the other thing I was interested in, was community development. And so I think I was there for 4 or 5 days, and I had put together an event, and that I started talking to people about doing and participating in and helping out and all that. And Giorgio, in his first day in the office that I was there, said, "No, we're not doing this kind of stuff. We don't need it." So I basically left and said my goodbyes to everyone. But I basically left then and never went back. And I did a couple of projects with Steve Ross and with Warner's. Later, I got involved with the World Cup Committee. I joined the U.S. Soccer Federation as a representative of Special Olympics International, which was a program I was very passionate about.
Well, were you part of the 82 Hail Mary for the World Cup, to get the World Cup in 82?
No. This was late 80s. We were going for 94.
Got it. Okay.
Yeah,
because there was that.
Yeah,
sort of
there was a
80s.
replacement. Yeah, we were going to be a replacement country. They gave it to Mexico again, I think, or Colombia, or I don't know. But no, it was late 80s. I was on the board. Werner Fricke was president. We thought that, by that time, we had the potential to get the World Cup. We certainly had, the infrastructure side. We didn't necessarily have the football side, but we were getting better. And we got it. So I was involved with them for, that amount of time. And then, we had this whole revolution at the convention when, Werner Fricke was voted out and Alan Rothenberg was voted in. I was a member of the revolutionary side. I felt, unfortunately, that, our federation as commissioned at the time was not able to pull this thing off and maximize. This was our maybe one chance in a lifetime to maximize, our opportunity to host the World Cup and to benefit, from the legacies that are left behind, World Cup countries, World Cup host countries, and
including a new league, right? Yeah. That hopefully would not repeat the same mistakes as the past.
Yep. So we went through that whole growth. I consider it a growth period in our federation, and then I stayed on a bit until we finished with the World Cup, and then another shiny thing got my attention. I don't know what it was, but
well, let me. First of all, this has been great, and I don't want to keep you like all night because we could go all night, but I know you don't want to, and I wouldn't want to put you in that position anyway. But let me give you a couple of lightning round questions because there are a few that I just got to knock out before I let you go. Talk to me about victory in the movie and playing next to Pelé and Michael Caine and the like in 1982. How did that come about?
So I'm at a dinner with Pelé. I'm trying to convince him to become my soccer ambassador for Special Olympics International. And he said, well, I can't this year. I'm doing this movie in Budapest. And I said, what movie? And he said, if you want to participate, they still haven't cast all of the parts. So I said, I would love to. The next thing I know is I get a call from Ahmet Erdogan, who was working with the producer, Freddie Fields, and who was the one that got Pelé involved. So Ahmed says, Freddie wants you to fly out to LA, wants you to read the script, and he wants to talk to you. So I fly out to LA, I read the script. I talked to him, he said, look, these are the characters that have been cast. And of course, my thing was, okay, Pelé is doing this, it's going to be fun. But when I realized John Huston was the director, then there was nothing standing in my way to doing this. So I went to LA thinking I'd have to convince Freddie Fields to cast me. But he said, no problem. John Huston knows about you. We've seen your photograph. He's having trouble casting. No, they didn't even tell me at the time. He said, look at any of these characters that haven't been cast yet. And then let me know which character you want to play, and we'll make it happen. So I fly back to New York, and I literally had an acting coach. I was very interested in the profession at the time because, in fact, Jay Emmett always used to say, I'm going to make you a star. And if I wanted it,
fair disclosure for fans who were not around at that time, and I had some female friends at the time, would let's put it this way. You did have, and still arguably still do, have some movie star looks to you. You did have a little bit of that benefit, and I'm sure that's partially why
it didn't hurt.
They were trying to get you in there, right?
Yeah. So I come back to New York. I picked this part of this Frenchman because I'd been working on this French accent. I always wanted to speak French, but I figured if I had the accent, it would be a good head start. So I picked this French. He had a small part, never got to the game, but he had, I thought, a really pivotal part that I could make something out of. So, and I even had an agent at the time, a manager or something. And so my manager called. She said, Freddie wants you in Budapest like in a week. Can you do that? I said, absolutely. So I get to Budapest. All my luggage is lost in Heathrow. I don't have any luggage. I've got a pair of jeans, some flip-flops, a T-shirt, and a wraparound sweater. That's what I had. I just get into the hotel. Pelé comes over. He goes, okay, and it's like 5 o'clock. So we have a 6 o'clock dinner with Freddie and John at the International Hotel. He said, you better dress up. I said, well, that's not going to happen. But so we get there. He's wearing, a blue tuxedo. Pelé used to dress beautifully, extravagantly. And so we get to this hotel, Intercontinental Hotel. The restaurant's on the top floor. We get out of the elevator. The waiters are wearing tuxedos. We get to the table. There's Freddie Fields, suit and tie, dressed to the nines. But John, he's wearing like a Mexican wraparound. He's wearing sandals. I don't even know if he was wearing underwear, but, nothing. I lost all my insecurity about my, my clothes, and we had a great time. So here's how I got cast as Baumann, the bad German guy, right? So John Huston says, I understand, from Freddie that you wanted the part of this French guy. And he says, we already cast it, but I need you in the game. He said, we would be totally wasting you if we cast you for somebody that, for a character that wasn't playing the game. So you're playing the game, but I want you to play Baumann, the Nazi captain. So of course I know the part, and, there's no speaking whatsoever. There's just, playing and making
some
drama.
longing camera stays on your
Yeah.
mug. Yeah.
Yeah. So I said, John, I really thank you for, inviting me onto this production. But I really, I'm looking to get into acting. And he said, I'll tell you what. And he made this, the film, what all film directors do, they put their fingers together, their thumb and forefinger together, and they make a screen, right? That this is what they see through the camera. So he made this screen with his fingers, and he put it on my face, and he said, it's going to be you. And then he put it on Pelé's face, and he said, it's going to be Stallone. Then back to me, he said, it's going to be you, and it's going to be Stallone. And he talked me into it. So that was my casting session.
Yeah, and those scenes, those soccer scenes were actually quite good. I mean, I it's not an easy thing to do, not an easy trick.
And the other thing he promised me. Oh, this was the other thing he promised me, because John wasn't going to direct the action sequences. He didn't feel he knew enough about the game. He didn't feel he had enough experience about shooting pro sports, and specifically soccer. Not that he thought he needed it, but he hired probably the best sports photographer, guy by the name of Robert Rieger, that created channels that created ABC Wide World of Sports with the other mega sports producer. I forget his name, but he had Robert Rieger shoot all of the game action. But he said, "I'm going to shoot the finale between you and Stallone." So I couldn't say no. I did. And, it was fun. It was a great time. We had, the guys that Pele and Ardilas and Bobby Moore, but half the, I think it was Ipswich team was there. Donny Osmond, Michael, etc. I mean, we had a great time. And the funny thing, John always knew what pub the players were at during takes. He always knew where to send his assistant, because somebody always told him, okay, they're at this hotel, they're at this bar, they're at this place. But I spent most of my time with John and watching him work. And we were staying at the same hotel, so everybody else had cars. I didn't have a car. I would drive with John and his daughter, to a granddaughter, and his assistant to and from the set. So we had a chance to talk and really get to know each other. We played backgammon every Thursday night. We had regular card games, poker games. It was fun. It was a good time.
All right. Go ahead. Yeah.
I was going to say, and Budapest is such an incredible city. I mean, it's on the Danube. It's so romantic. It's lit up like a jewel at night. It was just, fantastic. It was a great time during the year. So it was a good time.
I thought did I read somewhere that you're working on some stuff now, maybe around the Cosmos story or your life around that time for some kind of treatment? Yes. All right. Yep. Without violating confidences, can you let our audience in on some of that?
Yeah. We've been trying to let everybody know as much as possible. We've been in development for
who's we? Just for background.
I have a writing partner called Roy Hewlett. He's an industry guy. He's a distributor mostly, but he's a writer, producer. And I met him actually through Jay Emmett. Roy wanted to produce a film about Steve Ross. And he had optioned a book by Connie, forget her last name.
Connie Brook, Master of the Game.
Connie Brook,
oh my God, that book is that is a revelation.
Yeah. And so Steve had already died by this time, and Roy was chasing down, some leads, and got to Jay Emmett, who was Steve Ross's second in command at Warner's from its inception and through its Time Warner evolution. But he was retired, living in Florida. And I'd been in touch with Jay and Steve, of course, forever, and Clive Toy. And so Jay guided or counseled Roy to drop the project because he's going to lose a lot of money. Nobody in Hollywood is going to make a film about Steve Ross based on Connie Brook's book. So that's out. But he said, I'll tell you what, you're in LA. A good buddy of mine, Werner Roth, is in LA. He's the captain of the Cosmos. He's got a project he'd love to produce, and he's been working on for a while, and maybe you should join him with that project. And so it's exactly what happened. Roy called, we got together. He lives, 20 minutes away. We got together and we started developing this project. We had a development deal with a French production company that didn't materialize, but it did keep our momentum going. And so we decided to try to, instead of finding a writer and a production house, we would first write a script. And it's turned into a series now from a film, but it's a TV series, a limited series, about the rise and fall of the New York Cosmos and my and Clive Toy's personal interaction with that story. Clive's early days, my early days, and how we kind of came together with the Erdogan's and Ross and Jay, and took this journey together. And so we'd like to see it as a series. I think it's a deep enough story that you can write a series about it.
Oh, it's also an incredible time, given we're streaming it right now, right? You could do a series without it being sort of, it can be just a handful of episodes per season. There's a lot of stuff you can creatively do with it versus what you could have done 10 even to 5 years ago.
And also the timing of the World Cups coming up, men's and women's, and then us hosting the World Cup in 26 and with Canada and Mexico. So we think the next 5 years, soccer's been a very tough sell in Hollywood. But now Ted Lasso is helping, people are talking Ted Lasso. So once we have a completed series outline, a completed draft of a pilot, and maybe a Bible, kind of a show and tell overview of the series, we're going to start showing it around and hope we can get more interest than we have in the past.
Yeah, personally would love to see it, but you know how many Cosmos fans there still are out there. You know how popular that logo still is.
Oh yeah.
Without a team for years now, even in a reconstituted version, no longer with us, sadly. It's an iconic brand. The memories are arguably forever. And you were part of it. You were a significant part of it. And God forbid it could actually see the light of day for another generation of fans. And look, this kind of leads me to my next question, my last question, really.
Well, let me contribute to your current flow. The Cosmos brand, it's heartbreaking, where it is, its current status. But I've recently gotten involved with an old friend and teammate, Shep Messing.
I've heard of him.
Who was the goalkeeper on the 77 championship team.
We're still trying to get him, by the way.
Well, I'm going to help you with that.
Twist his arm again for me. Thank you.
So here's the story. I've gotten back involved with Shep and to some degree the game, because MASL, small sided indoor, it is the game. It's a different version, but we play football. And we think we'd like to resurrect the New York Cosmos as a Long Island team in addition to the New York Arrows.
I love it. Keep going.
Well, that's, we're working on this pod concept, which is, to grow the league. We want to grow the game, grow the league. We think this pod concept of seeding certain areas that we have direct access to and where we know quite a few people and quite a few people know us. We think if we reseed the Long Island Arrows and reseed the New York Cosmos, initially as an indoor, but the future of American soccer is the super club. It's a successfully owned and operated professional club that has 11-a-side men's and women's, 6-a-side arena soccer men's and women's, youth academy for development, early childhood youth development and leagues, and create a pipeline within a community, because I'm a great believer in the book called The Gold Mine Effect. It's Rasmus Anderson's, decade-long study about the performance gene, and that if you dig deep enough in any community, you can develop athletes of extraordinary potential. And, we've got an opportunity now. Shep and I have talked for decades about, what's wrong with American soccer, how we can help it grow and develop more and better players. And we think we have an opportunity with this Arena League. And that's what we're going to do.
Well, that leads me to my last question. But by the way, did you ever play indoor in the formative NASL indoor years in 75, 76-ish?
Not NASL. I did play indoor when I was on the U.S. national team in the early 70s. We played against the Russian national team in Philadelphia. And because the conditions were, impossible to play in, we moved the game indoors and played 6-a-side on their hockey rink, on the Philadelphia, whatever they are, on their indoor hockey rink. Indoor soccer has been played for hundreds of years by every, advanced professional amateur soccer club in the world. They do it in the off season to stay in shape. It's a training protocol called Rondo. Everybody in the world knows arena soccer in one form or another. And I think, we have a chance to connect sand soccer and futsal and arena soccer with the outdoor game, but do it in every community and create recreational and, enjoyment and competitive opportunities for players of every age throughout their lives. It's what we started this conversation about. It's the international social club writ large, right? It's a place where kids and their parents can go, they can play, they can socialize, and they can support a club. It's not been done.
Regardless of what format it's in, right? Because that's
absolutely
the unique thing about this, right? Is that we say super club right now. Unfortunately, we hear that sounds like Man City with a team in MLS and a team in the Australian League and at Red Bull and multiple franchises. That's one way, but you're talking about soccer on all levels, right? And having
community,
and having teams and activities across the entire spectrum, regardless of league, regardless of it's indoors, outdoors, beach, whatever.
Yeah. And you play in all of those leagues, and you're giving opportunity to young players to raise their performance levels, through 6-a-side, through, arena soccer, through futsal, through, into 11-a-side, through semi-pro, with USL and some of the others. But it's a community effort. And the other thing is, if it's done that way, the top of the pyramid is going to pay for the bottom of the pyramid. You're not going to have players being charged young players thousands of dollars to play soccer, in their own community. I mean, it's ridiculous.
Yeah, travel
it's
soccer.
It's pay to play, and it shouldn't be happening. The federation shouldn't let it happen. And they're really making it happen more. They're making it easier. So we're just looking at our players as a market, right? As a revenue stream, when we should really be looking at our players as our future fans, our future players, our future participants in the community. And we think Shep and I and Keith Tozer and JP Del Camera and all the heavy hitters at MASL, are like, okay, let's do this. So watch this space.
All right. Well, that leads me to my very last question then. And I think I understand where you're going to come from on this, but give me your assessment of the current state of pro soccer in this country, in particular Major League Soccer, right, which has its warts and all. However, some significant progress in real stadiums and all that kind of stuff. But, on the international level, has it really bloomed into anything, right? So yeses and nos. But through the eyes of somebody who played in the league that really kind of started it all in this country professionally, of substance, the NASL, how do you feel about the game professionally now as you look around and look to become more active and supportive of whatever this country is going to become soccer-wise?
Well, I think it's the state of play in the U.S. I think it's great compared to what it used to be. But as you say, it's not in competition with the international game. It's going to be a long time before we change, before we can challenge at the international level. I think the national team, the women's team, has certainly proven it, that it can be done. The men's national team will prove it. I think, they keep getting closer and closer. But the reasons, are really twofold in each of those situations. The reason for the women's national program doing so well internationally is because we are a country of positive and pro, women's athletic, objectives. We're supportive. And I think young girls have been playing and training and developing. Title IX has opened up the doors, for all of that. At the men's side, we're only as successful as we have been because of the players, not because of our system or because of the federation or anything they're doing at the, academy or developmental levels. The reason those players, we have a certain number of players in this country, a certain percentage, that play on their own, that have had early childhood development, that love the game, that play passionately, that train 3 hours a day because they know if they do less, they won't be competitive, that do all of those things, and they're not really being proactively encouraged by their coaches or their clubs or their leagues. But they're doing it on their own because they know they need to. And so they succeed, and they are driving the national program, both on the men's and on the women's side. Both all of those players are working on their own and not leaving it to the federation to develop them. So you've got that going. But at the developmental levels, we are not instituting the empirical research that's out there and the international knowledge about player development and performance maximization. And all the information is there. It's long-term athlete development. It's LATD. It's the 10-year, 10,000-hour rule. It's Rasmussen's gold mine effect. It's early childhood development. We've got a guy, Tom Beyer. The man is a genius at early childhood development. He's literally built from the ground up the Japanese system of football. Their pro leagues are incredibly competitive. Their national teams are competitive. We have access to this guy and to his knowledge, but we just don't apply it. We're a revenue-driven, coach-focused country when it comes to football. We need to be, a 501c, a non-for-profit. Don't charge any players at the youth level to play anywhere at any time. And we need to be player-centric and not coach-centric. And are we ever going to do that? I don't know. The MLS, I was contracted a decade ago, 2010, 2011, by MLS to do a state of play analysis for them. I had the luxury of watching players, talking to players, talking to coaches, seeing training programs, their development protocols. Talking to players was the most important thing. And the best players came from or had early childhood development. They've had this whole pipeline that we've been talking about. And the players that were struggling didn't. There was one simple thing that was the red flag or the smoking gun, and it was cardiovascular. The ability for your heart to go from full active exertion to active rest in the shortest period of time. And that requires a special training. And that's what 3 hours a day will do for you. That's what deep water training will do for you. That's what high altitude training will do for you, which all these international players do. But it's not something that, for one reason or another, that, the masters that be are currently applying. Everybody agrees that the U.S., its size and its its wealth, should have been leading the world in football by now. But and the answers are there, the solutions are there, the action is not. I don't think they're not interested really in that. I think it's more of a revenue-driven, sustainable, like with Don Garber and the MLS. Player development was a late process. Their first objective was financial security and soccer-only stadiums, which turned out to be the best idea, right? Because it really provided a financial stability, which always caused failure. But they have this, and now they can build from that. But are they going to do, promotion and relegation? Doubtful. Are they going to focus on, player development and youth development? Doubtful, because it's not in their best interest. They're looking to make rich people rich, and, they'll do whatever they can. The stadiums, a bunch of those stadiums were built on the community's dime. So, it's hard to see them as, this goody two-shoe, developmental idea. It should be, but it's not.
Yeah, I mean, those are really, really good points, and the fact that the MLS is launching frankly, a directly competitive feeder league with MLS Next. I mean, what's USL all about? I mean, there's so much, and this reeks of big pro sports and money and private equity and, shall we say, cheap money that maybe the increase in interest rates over the next number of years may kind of let some of the air out of that. Maybe some of those more noble and more sustainable approaches that you're talking about may actually have a chance to kind of take root once sort of, let's call it maybe this initial phase of investment and money and franchise values kind of, I don't want to say dissipates. I hope not dissipates, but maybe kind of, moderates a little bit, because at the end of the day, it's one thing to have a shiny stadium and a great crest on your jersey, right, with a sponsor on it. But if the quality of the product and the quality of the player and the competitiveness on the international level, the supposed ultimate arbiter of how a country is coming along, if that isn't sort of going to the next level, and you said it before, it arguably should have happened a long time ago. You wonder where the next sort of phase of the sports growth and success in this country comes from.
It's going to come from the player. The federation to some degree, but the MLS doesn't have any interest in international, or it has interest in international competition. They'd love to be, but not at the risk of their financial, security and capability and investing in the grassroots and all the way up and in all the things that we're talking about. Because they're filling stadiums now as it is, doing what they do with the players they have and the performances they deliver, and which they do a good job. The stadiums are nice and clean. The press reports get out, all the information's there, the data is collected. They have more, ticket sellers than player development people on their staffs. But, it's not what the player deserves. It's not what the player needs. And this game is about the player. It's not about the guys, the suits in the, in the suites. And that's not happening as far as I can tell. There's no indication that there's any interest in that happening with plans or ideas or anything like that. They're driven by a different set of objectives than the player is. The player can use them, and this is the beauty of the MLS. It's a fantastic platform to exhibit your capabilities, and I think a lot of players have taken that route, MLS to international development. And but yeah, your individual international development is better served by playing internationally, almost on every level, almost at every league level, because you'll get better. And again, just getting back to that state of play analysis, it's called cardiovascular interval stamina. That's the ability that dictates how quickly you can recover and go 100% again. And if you put a EPL game or, La Liga or a Bundesliga on a monitor against the MLS on another monitor, you will think you're watching either slow motion or, fast motion. But it is not the same. And that is because their interval stamina is not capable of sustaining a level of exertion that you need to be skillful, run into position, pass the ball accurately. So you have passes going sideways, going back, slow build up and all of that. And then a few seconds of high speed interaction in the attacking third. But, it's not at the level of international. And now with the media capability of watching anything being played anywhere, literally, you have a lot of choices. MLS, get your act together, or, wind up with the 50,000 seats in your stadium, but the tens of millions watching everybody else.
All right, there is a reason, many reasons why Werner Roth is a member of the National Soccer Hall of Fame, a treasure, a keeper of the flame, and as we remember the founding of the New York Cosmos North American Soccer League franchise 51 years ago this week, in February of 1971, we thank him for allowing us to add yet another chapter, another layer, another bucket of gold nuggets in our continuing quest to understand the full and complete picture of the history of that club, the history of the league, the importance, all the things that, frankly, were set in motion or advanced, shall we say, in the history and the development of the sport in this country. We'll tip our Cosmos cap in the general direction, not only of Werner, but the great Clive Toye, one of our earliest guests on this show, being the sort of chief instigator at behest of the brothers Erdogan and Steve Ross back in the day. Perhaps we'll have Clive back on again to kind of give us some other highlights of sort of that founding and the things that sort of occurred in the earliest of days, perhaps the moldiest and oldest of thoughts around the founding of the franchise. But thank you to Werner, and we thank you, of course, for listening. We also want to encourage you, if you've enjoyed this show, you're going to find lots of great other episodes, not just in soccer and the Cosmos, but also all kinds of teams and leagues and sports of yore. And all of the catalog of the shows that we've done thus far and will in the future can be found at goodseatsstillavailable.com. Of course, you can subscribe and follow us whatever and wherever that you enjoy to get podcasts and streaming audio. And of course, if you'd rate and review us and give us a hefty 5 stars or whatever, the thumbs up or whatever the attaboys or whatever you could do to help the algorithms, we appreciate that. And tell your friends, why don't you? And there's just lots of great episodes. There's I guarantee there's something in there and that you're going to enjoy and hopefully discover for the first time. If you'd like to send us some email, you can do that too. We're at hello@goodseatsstillavailable.com. Please, by all means, we enjoy our proverbial electronic cards and letters. Thank you for those. Let's see, what else? Our social media feeds. Yeah, you'll find various postings on Facebook. We got a little page devoted to us there. On Instagram, you'll find us at Good Seats Still Available. And on Twitter, probably our most active social platform, you'll find us at Good Seats Still. What else? On the website, you'll find a little link to subscribe to our weekly email newsletter. Just send us your name and your email address, and voila, you will be in the know, hopefully a few hours or days ahead of our upcoming episodes. So you'll be sort of ready to go, and perhaps before the hoi polloi, you'll be good to go, and you'll have all the knowledge you need to survive the week ahead. And I think that's it. Let's say thanks, of course, to Jerry Payne. Jerry Payne, audio excellence. It just rolls off the tongue, doesn't it? Thank you, kind sir. And we, of course, cannot leave you without a little musical send-off. And, of course, we've got to go back to the 1981 feature film. It was called Escape to Victory in markets outside the United States, but those who grew up and saw the film or continue to enjoy the film in streaming fashion or whatever, here in the United States know it simply as Victory. Sylvester Stallone, Michael Caine, who's who of soccer players and stars, including one, Werner Roth, yes, on the evil German team, but we will, in the realm of dramatic license, we will give him a free pass on that. And here it is. It's Bill Conti, the great composer extraordinaire Bill Conti, with the ending theme to the movie that we in the United States called Victory. Enjoy the memories, rewatch the film, and until next week, we'll see you. Bye-bye.